Hi everyone, I'm Allison. Thanks for joining me for Where I'm From, number 77 with Emi, who will be joining us shortly. I always start by asking people what they're reading and telling you what I'm reading. I read Allegra Goodman's Sam. For those of you who watched Where I'm From, you probably know that Natalie Serber mentioned this book to me when I had her on Where I'm From. We were talking about like the cruelty of teenage girls, our experiences with them, and she mentioned this book, Allegra Goodman's Sam, and I picked it up and read it, and I loved it. It really spoke to autobiographical fiction, sort of. It just felt so real, and I loved how it was about, hi.
Hey, what's up?
That was relatively easy. Yay. I like it when it's relatively
I
easy.
know you never know how it's going to be with the IG lives, right? Like,
No, you really don't. And last time it was like we had to try like 13 times, it felt like. So it was nice for this to just be fairly simple. I was talking about what I just read. I read this book, Sam, by Allegra Goodman. Does that sound weird to you? Did you just have a weird sound?
I'm sorry. I just set up my phone. It's great. But the Sam doesn't sound weird at all.
I loved this book. And what are you reading, Emmy?
Um, okay, so I finished reading We Were Once a Family for the second time last night. I wish I had it right here with me, but it came out today by Roxana Asgharian, and it's about the child welfare system through the lens of the Hart family murder suicide, where two white adoptive parents drove their
Yes.
sick
Oh,
black kids.
yes.
Yeah,
I know who they are.
yeah. I had no idea. So like to me, this was all news. But it's a beautiful book, and it's really deeply reported about the failures of the foster care system, which is really not how that story is usually like used. And it's a wonderful book.
Okay, I will check it out because I do know that case, and I mean, it was tragic on so many levels. And I thought it was a failure of the system when I first read it. It's like, how did they have these children? So many, and obviously we know, you and I both know. Do I sound okay to you? Because I sound really weird to me.
You sound great to me. Do I
Okay,
sound okay?
you sound fine. I sound like there's a robot in my ear. But I'll just ignore that. Um, we both know that the welfare system is racist. So if you know that, then that answers a lot of the questions of why they had those
Yeah.
children.
Yeah. I mean, and they kept trying to get more. They
Yes.
like because that was the narrative too, is like, oh, they were overwhelmed. So much of the media fell into this trope of like, oh, foster kids are like unmanageable or like adoptees are unmanageable, and then it's like, then why did they keep trying to adopt more kids? And like, why were they going through IVF? Like, it just doesn't add up in ways that like Roxana really probes. I can't. I'm sorry for talking so much about this
No.
book, but I love it so much.
I think it's fascinating. Have you seen the Atlanta episode that's sort of a riff on this topic?
I have not seen it, but I feel like I kind of need to go watch it now.
Yeah, it's dark. It's very well done, but it's hard to watch. As it is just anything that you feel like children are being victimized,
Yeah.
and gaslit. I mean, victimized and so gaslit and lied to, and all of those things, and they have no agency,
Yeah.
which is the issue. Children in the system have so little agency, and it's not okay. Just because they
No.
can't vote and they don't have money doesn't mean they don't count.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. It sucks.
Yeah. So, but
Well,
I actually think this is a good segue into your poem, Emmy.
yeah.
I mean, I do think this is related to your poem and your whole story, because you didn't have a lot of agency.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, I mean, when you said that the kids in the system don't have a lot of agency, I was like, kids in America don't necessarily have a lot of agency, right?
That's
Like they're
right.
really kind of at the mercy of whatever caregiver
Mm-hmm.
you have, whether that's the state or your parents or somebody else.
True. I mean, with the whole gun epidemic, I think our attention is definitely being drawn to, that if this was happening to a different population, would this continue to happen?
Yeah. Oh, that's such a good point. Yeah, definitely.
You
It's
know,
yeah,
thoughts and
yeah,
prayers. Like,
yeah.
okay, great. That's not really cutting it. Thanks.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, I feel like our kind of American obsession with choice and with like, you know, like personal freedom, it really it holds people who have the power to make personal choices, like who are above 18 and other reasons, like on a pedestal. And it's basically, I think it devalues kids because it's like, well, you can't vote, so like, what do you matter?
Mm-hmm.
Like, you don't matter at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I definitely felt, I think both of us felt pretty, you know, trapped, to simplify it. You know, just kind of like, oh, I guess this is, and I think a lot of kids and also children, I'll speak for myself, but I know this is true for a lot of other people that I've spoken to. You don't really know things are awry for a while.
Yeah. 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 Absolutely. It's
Because it's your
just,
family, it's
yeah,
your life.
it's your only context for what is normal and what's not, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're like, oh, this feels kind of weird, but I don't know. I mean, you know, this is family and I love them. And I mean, they love me. They, you know, of course they do. And I'm not saying they didn't or they don't, but it's just, yeah, you just don't have a lot of ability to reflect or understand that there are options that are not yours currently. um, so your poem, I found it so emotional reading it, especially having read your memoir, because you touch on a lot of this in your memoir. But it's different, I think, for me, oftentimes with these poems because they are from the perspective of the child. You know, like not the perspective, but that place. They're living in that place.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
so.
Thank you. Yeah, I feel like it was really fun to go back and like revisit poetry because I did so much of it in high school and stuff. And I feel like poetry is such a good, and especially this format, it's such a good way to kind of have lists, like lists of items. And because my mom was a hoarder and our home was just filled with things, it's like, wow, I have a lot of lists like that.
Yeah, yeah, you do have a lot of lists in your poem too. I mean, and understandably.
Yeah. Do you want me to read it? Is that what
Yes,
comes next?
yes,
Okay.
please. It's whenever you want, but I would like you to read it.
Okay, cool. I'll read it.
Yes.
Um, okay, where I'm from. I am from mousetraps, unopened shopping bags, narrow paths sneaking between rooms. I'm from the compost heap in the alleyway, warm earthworms writhing, strewn with banana peels. I'm from the trumpet vines, the hostas, whose roots my mom untangled, as if they were my own unwashed hair. I'm from Adderall and Diet Coke Plus with B vitamins, from 27 flavors of low-fat ice cream. I'm from Walgreens fluorescent lights at 1 a.m. and orange clearance stickers, from good enough for government work, from if it weren't for the last minute, it'd never get done, declared at 3 a.m. in defiance of 1,000 shattered deadlines. I'm from Garrison Keillor, before and after he was canceled. All you can drink milk and butter lovers popcorn dinners. From hydrocortisone rubbed into the hives after my mom's 30 years of 9 to 5 with her Nuritsu film processor. A grid carved into her back and dripped with 20 common allergens. Bookshelves sagging with mildewed tomes unread, feathered boas bulging from the closet, dresses taunting all the parties I'd never attend to mock my greasy scalp. I'm from this detritus, petrified once I fled, into a museum of the life I left behind. I pushed my hand against the glass.
Yay! Oh, I loved it. I was so struck by how objects that we love that might be bewitching and wonderful when they're put in this context are not, like feather boas, you know, like because I had a feather boa growing up and I loved it and it was so magical, but not in this context. You know,
Yeah.
none of this in this context. I really felt that the sort of the walls coming in. Like
Mm-hmm.
you're just like surrounded and now it's petrified. That was just, it was really beautiful. And I love the trumpet. I loved it all, but I love the entangling trumpet vines, like your unwashed hair. That was really, the trumpet vines are getting care, not you. It's like, damn, come on, you can do it. You know, like she can do it, but
Yeah.
she's not. So I thought that was really powerful, like where the energy was spent, where
Thank,
her energy was spent.
yeah. Thank you. I feel like I'm learning new things just from hearing you talk about it. Um, because I've been working on an essay about my mom's garden for like 4 years, and I can't because my mom loved her garden, so much. I mean, she loved me too, but she like took such care of it. And I think like for you and for me, like, and for anybody who's had a parent who like loves us and fails in some way, which is probably all parents, you're
Yeah.
like, you look at this thing and you're like, like, you're kind of like, how did you choose this, right? Like, how were the hostas the thing that were like, that's what needs my attention?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And it really spoke to that. And also, I think I felt this in acceptance as well, but I really felt it here. This, like, the sort of like razor's edge of like, this is a fun adventure. Like, there are no rules, but then there are no rules. This
Yeah,
isn't a fun adventure. This isn't safe.
yeah,
I don't feel safe. And
yeah,
I really felt that. And I think for so many of us, I think sometimes from the outside looking in, it can be like, wow, it seems like you're having a lot of fun. Like you stay up till 1 in the morning, you eat tons of ice cream. Like this is cool. Um, but for us, it's like, actually, bedtime seems neat. What is that?
yeah,
You know, I think I see it on the TV, these kids with bedtimes. I mean, it could be good to go to bed. I don't know. So I just felt like that sort of like sort of the like roller coaster, the like House of Mirrors of being a child where there's not a lot of routine or boundaries or you
yeah,
know uh, whatever words you want to use to say like certain things are going to happen at certain times, and
yeah,
that helps you kind of build a framework of what life looks like.
yeah,
And when you don't have that, it's not fun. It's
yeah, absolutely.
scary.
Like even as an adult, like I'm taking a class that's from 5 to 8 p.m., which is like in my normal dinner time, and then every single day I'm like, what's happening? Like my life is turned like upside down, and I'm 30 years old, like, and I can get a sweet green like on the way to class. I just don't. So it's interesting to look back and be like, wow, yeah, like in some ways I feel like having a boring life is absolutely great for kids, you know?
Yeah. I mean, that's definitely something we've endeavored to do. And it's been good for me too.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Boring is, I mean, I was actually talking about this with a friend last week, this kind of feeling average for the first time in my life when I had children. Like I could kind of disappear into the mother role and be nameless and unimportant, and that is very difficult for a lot of people when they have children. It's terrible. They feel erased. And for me it was like, oh great,
Wow.
great, I love this. I am not of note.
Yeah.
I am I'm normal.
Yeah.
This is neat.
Yeah.
I'm into this.
Did it feel like a specific, I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of other pressures with
Yeah,
motherhood, right?
of
But did it
course.
feel
Yeah.
like a specific pressure was lifted?
I just let a lot of things go. I
That's
was
great.
very frustrated with my work. I had been harassed a lot and I was done. And I had not dealt with a lot of trauma. So it all had just like all built on each other where to the point where I just wasn't able really to do it anymore. And so there was something about it that felt like liberating. I mean, I'm not to say it wasn't hard and I wasn't depressed. I was, but there was, I know this piece that's really hard for a lot of people where they feel like no one really takes them seriously or wants to talk to them anymore because they're just a mom. I found
Mm.
that really like good. Like I was like, oh great. Go talk to someone else.
I love that. That honestly, that feels so like that. That's such a hopeful message, Allison. Like, I hope that you like, like spread that message from the mountaintops, right? Um, yeah, there's a writer that I really love. Her name is Lee Page. And she gave me like so many notes on acceptance that like made it what it is. But she's like, for me, she's like the consummate like friend's mom. She was like my high school friend's mom, and she was really there for me. Like when I had to call somebody like at 11 p.m. to like vent. And she had a difficult childhood, and she said that for her and her husband, like, when they had kids, they were like, we're going to give them like a stable childhood. And that was like super healing for her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think if you have children, or even if you have them in your life, it's just if you have a childhood where you're very adultified, where it sounds like you did, I found it very shocking how old 8 actually is. It was like, oh, this is a small person who's not a grown-up. No matter how many times I don't, but like people would say, oh, you're so wise, oh, you're so mature, or you're an old soul, or blah, 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 blah. You're actually just 8. And so that was very, very, like, just those different ages as they have been, like, whoa, this is alarming. This is what 10 looks like. This is not what it felt like, Yeah. So I don't know if you'll have that experience, but that was like mind-blowing for me.
Oh my gosh, for me, like I think I don't have kids yet. And so for me it's more like with mentoring like teenagers. Yeah. And like, wow, okay. And I think teenagers are so fascinating because in some ways they're like little adults, but then you also are like, wow, like part of being a little adult is feeling like kids often feel like they're a full adult, and then you're like, wow, there's a lot you don't know yet. Like there's a lot you need to be protected from still.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Even like when you're 17, which, I mean, that was definitely when I was 17. A lot of people were like, oh, you're a grown up. You know what I mean? And you're so not a grown up at 17. You're really not. So it's especially when I see older men with like 17-year-olds, I'm like, that's a child. That's a child.
It's so.
It's yuck.
I know. It's like I'm glad that there's a culture we've like kind of moved. Oh, like when I was growing up, I feel like it was like, okay, well, 17 is basically an adult because 18 is an adult. And like I do think the discourse has moved away a little bit from being like 18 is like the bare minimum, and like you probably shouldn't don't date an 18-year-old either. Like like just because it's legal does not mean that it's like advisable, ethical, moral, right?
Yeah, and I mean, I dated, I think, a 23-year-old when I was 18, and I'm like, wow. When I was 23, I was like, damn, I don't want to date 18-year-olds. What was he doing? I mean, I know what he was doing, but like, eek.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, no, I'm not going to say it. I was about to be like, well, I bet you were a great 18-year-old.
I was very
mature. Say, that's how they get you.
That's right. I was very mature, and all those things that people say. And when you're that age, like for a long time, I internalized that as a compliment. Like, yeah, I am very mature.
Yeah.
So, yeah. We really got off on a tangent, but I think that in your poem you feel a lot of that. Like, I know you are small in your poem, but I feel a lot of you're not getting to be a child.
Yeah.
And that's why the window for me is so powerful at the end. I feel like you're looking through a window at something you never had. Like we look out the window at what we're missing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I'm really glad that I got to think through that and kind of share that, because I think for me it's also like associated with kind of like upward mobility, and from like being in a very unstable place to being in like a stable place, and just how there's loss in growing up, but then there's also loss in like, hey, these things that I used to like dream about, like having a frappuccino every day, like I would not do, I'm just like, oh wow, I had the mobility that I wanted in my life, and now those things like aren't even, they're not on my radar, right? So that's definitely been something that I've kind of dealt with too.
Well, I think also the grief associated with accepting that you didn't have those things, like that it's happened. Childhood happened. You didn't have those things.
Yeah,
And there's grief associated with that acceptance, I think. Yeah.
definitely, definitely, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So what was it like writing the poem? You've talked about it, but anything else like did you write a lot? Did you just write the one you wrote? Like what was your process? Some people write a bunch, some people just write one.
Yeah, so that's a great question. I didn't I didn't write that much, but I did find myself like coming back, like kind of circling through like the Mad Libs of like the different categories, right?
Yeah.
Um and yeah, I think I also okay, I was also feeling really like hollowed out when I when I was working on this, in full disclosure, right? Where I've been writing a lot.
You have been writing a lot.
I
You have.
yeah,
Because you wrote your
yeah,
book,
like
obviously, but you've been publishing a lot, and that
it's a lot.
it does.
Yeah, and so it honestly was like it was kind of freeing to be like, okay, I don't
Mm-hmm.
have to have like the same expectations like that
Right.
that I'm always holding myself to,
Mm-hmm.
and it's been so long since I did something that was like creative,
Right.
that was like let me pitch this or let me try to place this,
Mm-hmm.
because that's the type of writing that I do now as my full-time job.
Mm-hmm.
But it was really fun, like kind of reading through it and then reading it out loud and being like, if I were like being like, wow, there's a lot of little things in here that I really like and that like I wouldn't have even noticed, right? Of like just assonance and like
Yeah.
consonants and um so it was really nice to get back in touch with that part of myself.
Oh, yeah. I love it when it feels like it's a positive experience. I think it's nice to write something that you're not trying to sell or get someone to approve or, because like whatever you send me, I'm going to be like, great, I love it. There's no, like, I'm not sending it back with red pencil marks on it, like it is accepted. And it's nice to, I think it's hard to make that space for ourselves, and so I'm happy that I get to provide a little of that space, like, because I think that kind of writing is incredibly valuable, and
Yeah,
it's hard sometimes to let ourselves have that space.
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, thank you for I
Oh, so
to
bad.
me, I think oh yeah, I think we've talked about this before where like my most for me like the most essential part of like memoir writing is that feeling of acceptance of being like, oh, I wrote just like the raw truth and somebody read it and they said like you're still good enough as a person, and that's where like any editing or polishing or anything like that can really begin. Um yeah. So I love that you do this. And
I
I
love it.
think part of it. Yeah.
It's so generative, like for me, just as a person, like because I create the space. I think I'm much better at giving it to myself than I was
Mhm.
before I started, because I'm like, oh, this is so great, giving it to other people. Oh, okay, then I might also deserve this space. Like that is how my brain works, where I'm quick. I am usually quicker to give other people things than myself. So it's like, oh, okay, yeah, this is good for me too. So um I'm just grateful for everyone who's joined me, and I'm grateful you joined me, and I am really thrilled that we have become friends, like, yeah,
Yeah.
you're wonderful. Your writing's wonderful. I'm obviously a fan of you and your writing and all the things, because you're really an activist with your writing. And I was telling my husband last night after I read your Atlantic piece, um, but you should all go read it. Because the Horatio Alger bit was one of my favorite parts of the book, because I really like because that's the one you did the application for, where you had to like check your trauma, right? Oh,
Yep. Check adversity bingo.
oh man, I was like, and then sexual was not on there, right?
No, they don't. They're
Right.
like just period. And like they don't. They're like it's just one box, and it's like there's really the implication. It's like you need to be beaten, right?
Right.
Like,
Oh, for
like
sure.
sexual
Always.
abuse, like that counts, and like it's gross. Don't talk about it.
Yes.
We don't want to.
Oh, and it's like so not camera ready. Like nobody really wants to hear that because it's such a bummer. Like somehow people having broken bones is not a bummer in the same way, which is so effed up. But it's like you heal from that. Um, and so they like that. I
Yeah,
think that's sort of like you're broken, now you're whole. Like there's a
yeah,
very tidy narrative
yeah,
there.
yeah,
Where with sexual violence, you know, it's a lot messier. So they're just
yeah.
like, nope. But that reading that, because I, on a very minor level, when I was applying to colleges, I thought about, oh, what do I talk about? Like what do I disclose about what I've overcome?
Yeah.
And and what are people more interested in hearing about? And like all of that and just how you were all used,
Mhm. Yeah.
how you were all being used for a political agenda. And that you have that realization when you're there, sort of. That's how I read it anyway, where you're like, oh shit. Oh, that's what this is.
Yeah.
And I just found it like so, so insightful and powerful. So I was loved this what you wrote for the Atlantic, and I'm interested obviously in the book Bootstrapped. But I'm just so glad that you're out there talking about these things because they mean a lot to me, and I'm glad that someone as brilliant and as motivated as you is talking about these things because I think you'll make change. I really do. And so I'm just like, I'm so glad Emi's out there doing that. It makes me like I'm just thrilled.
Thank you. That means a lot. That means a lot. Yeah. Um, I think it's really easy to be a pessimist, and I've found myself falling into it. It's like, wow, it seems so easy to negatively impact the world and
Yeah,
so hard to make a positive change. Um, and so I really appreciate that.
I
And I'm
truly feel that way.
excited with you. Yeah.
I do. I think obviously your book, but then what the choices you're making afterwards, and just that you're shedding a light on these things, they're shining a light on these things that I think, and you talk about it in the book, because you're a white, pretty lady, people are more likely to listen to what you have to say, which is not right, but it's true.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, I see other people who are activists and they have made my blood boil because I'm just like, wow, you're so perfect. You're so pretty. You're like the perfect victim. Like, and why am I not like you? And I think it's so important to both I try to do what I can to advocate for people and then also to like pull back that curtain and be like, hey, like I am not a pristine survivor and nobody is, and sometimes you need to play that role to be heard, which is messed up, but that role is like not who that's not accurate of people's experiences,
No.
like we all are complicated people who respond to trauma and abuse like in different ways. And that's part of what makes us human. And that should be allowed. That should be like celebrated.
Yes. And to survive, you have to use a lot of different tools, and some of them are weapons. That's
Yeah,
just how it works.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Like you do whatever you can.
Yeah, exactly. Like we have this image of like the perfect person. Like I was talking to somebody who was saying that like if you were being abused and you like yelled at your abuser, like that would be wrong. And I was like, oh, that's like cute. But like there's so many things we have to do to survive that we're not always proud of, that don't always serve us well when we're out of the situation, and that also like should not be shamed or stigmatized.
I agree. And I also think that if you aren't yelling at your abuser, uh, you're probably yelling at yourself, degrading yourself, loathing yourself, hurting yourself. So there's no way out of the despair.
No,
Someone gets
absolutely.
hurt. So,
And sometimes having somebody yell at you might be a wake up call. You know, we have this image of turn the other cheek, but it's like sometimes people need to know what they're doing is harmful. And like they should already know, but you know, some if your kid yells at you, that might be, I don't know, who knows, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but
Yeah.
I'm just grateful for you and your writing and your work. And thank you for joining me. And do you have any last thoughts before, because we were wrapping up? Any last thoughts?
Um, no, but I hope that if anybody gets a chance to read my book here,
Yes. Please plug your book. It's so good.
oh, yeah, I really, it was fun to write. It's more fun to be done writing it though. And I hope it's even better.
Yes. And I loved her book and I wrote about it on Instagram. And it is, for me, as a person who survived some things, I felt like it was a really powerful book about knowing, learning, telling your story and how that is transformative. So thank you, Emi.
Thank you, Allison. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I loved it. Okay. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Take care.